Pokemon battles in traffic. I'm not surprised this was the result.
But his legs, Doctor. Which studio is gonna animate Pikachu's legs from now on?
Well, I'm not sure how to say this, but his legs. Going forward, his legs are going to be animated by JC staff.
Frankly, they should have asked Studio Bones. Across the universe of film and animation, there are many different positions in which people have the chance to shine bright. Actors, directors, voice actors, animators, the guy who changes the light bulbs on the set. If we're talking about the world of anime, however, well, good luck trying to get attention through any of those positions in there, because with weebs, the anime studios are what everything seems to revolve around. I mean, the lone exception might be Miyazaki, and look at him. They've reduced him to essentially nothing but a grumpy old boomer meme. And also, look at studios in other mediums. Besides a select few like Disney because of brain-dead Disney adults, how often do you see non-anime studios being shoved into the spotlight? When one of them releases something new, they don't get nearly the amount of attention or discussion an anime studio would. I mean, how many of you Adventure Time fans know that it was made by Fred Raider Studios? When you and your buddy used to talk about Family Guy funny moments, how often did Fuzzy Door Productions get mentioned? When Adam Sandler shits the bed for the 500th time, who out there goes and complains about the studio that produced the abomination? Now, had it been an anime, weebs would be roasting the studio so hard that the comments section would sound like Billy Madison.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but...
To many anime fans, the studio is the end-all be-all regarding the quality of a series. Poorly adapted the manga? Blame it on the studio. Weak animation? Blame it on the studio. Ridiculous censorship? Blame it on the studio. No second season? Blame it on the studio. Got put in the hospital when you were a small child and your parents banned Pokemon under their household forever? Blame it on the studio. Hell, a studio can't even make the most microscopic change to a series without getting put on a few fans' hit lists. It doesn't matter if the animators are suffering from bad work practices, like having to play real-life Fortnite under their desks, as many otaku are too worried over whether the studio made their anime look good. Now, should fans be putting so much weight into the studio behind an anime though? Is there more to how an anime looks and feels? Why is the fandom the way it is regarding studios? Those questions are an important part of what I'd like to get to the bottom of with this video. Well, it appears the victim was male. While some studios might receive criticism for their work during or after their anime's airtime, it's possible said anime will be discredited by fans before it's even begun, based on that studio's history. Even when the studio hasn't been announced yet, it's not uncommon to see comments like, "Kyoto Animation would be great for this type of show," or, "Oh god, please don't give it to Studio Dean." Maintaining a good reputation within the anime community sure feels important because fans do not forget. Failing to adapt a beloved manga can cause a studio's credibility to become so shit-stained that a ShamWow towel soaked in OxyClean couldn't clean it up. Look at JC Staff, for example. There's evidence scattered all around the net that fans have not forgiven them for One Punch Man Season 2. It's practically turned their name into a mark of doom. Studios that begin to falter with a series can likely expect to see comments and messages from fans begging them to change things, which can become as extreme as death threats. On the opposite end are the fans who see certain studios as absolute gods. If the studio succeeds at pleasing fans with an adaptation, they may face pressure and resentment over continuing to lack subsequent seasons. On the other hand, some positive releases will be followed by the studio's most die-hard fans preaching how hard said studio is saving anime. Oh boy, it's finally time to push the clocks forward to Studio Trigger's savings time. So then, why are so many fans this way? Well, one of the most notable reasons in my eyes is that we are living in a world where meme culture and raging on Twitter like a Call of Duty player stuck in 2009 are the norm. You can't count the amount of times you've seen faces like these shared around, can you? Now ask yourself what's more memeable, These cold horse scenes are this horse. What gets you more clicks on YouTube or social media? A video praising Studio Bones for the fluent animation in this overhaul fight? Or a video roasting them for this other overhaul fight that looks like Dead-Handed Deku animated it? When conversations happen about anime with mishaps like those, someone always has to mention them. Oh, so you want to publicly talk about how cool the cinematography in early Promised Neverland was? Well, good luck doing so without hearing someone state how massively Cloverworks fucked up Season 2. I suppose it makes sense that studios are the easiest target with how they're portrayed via trailers, promos, openings, and the like. They're like Coca-Cola in America with their names getting plastered over everything. So when Little Billy is unnecessarily outraged over the small bit of decent CGI in the Chainsaw Man adaptation, studios are something he can easily direct his temper tantrum at. Another factor that doesn't help is when studios are pulled into the negative spotlight via reports of poor work wages and conditions. Then for whatever reason, maybe because of influence from pre-unionized habits in early American animation, or Japanese cultural reasons that I'm too unsophisticated to know, the talent behind anime seems to be much more concealed to the public compared to those in other countries or mediums. For instance, from what I've noticed at anime conventions around the world, it seems like panels containing Japanese guests are more commonly dedicated to a studio as a whole, rather than a specific individual. Trying to find photos or the social media of the important people behind an anime can be surprisingly difficult. I mean, you could make a whole Where's Waldo book, but for Japanese animators. Well, I couldn't find them, but I did find the logo for Studio Dean. Yes, the studio behind an anime can play a role in whether it will look nice or not, but unbeknownst to many weebs, there are significantly more important factors to consider. Let's first look at the beginning of when and how new adaptations get greenlit. Most commonly, a manga publisher is looking to boost the sales of a series, so they ask a production company to turn it into an anime. This begins what is known as the pre-production phase, or in the case of adapting an adult manga, you can call it the pre-cum phase. If an agreement is reached, they then find an anime studio to animate it. A director is also hired, who will frequently work with everyone to assemble the rest of the staff, such as the episode art and layout directors, and some freelance animators. So those hype sequences in your favorite action anime aren't necessarily always done by members of its studio, but rather those who were brought in for freelance work known as key animators. Likely assisting them will be the in-betweeners, artists who draw the frames in the middle of the most important ones. That's right, they aren't tops or bottoms, they're in-betweeners. They are also commonly used in what is called outsourcing. It's when cheaper studios and freelancers, frequently from other countries, take over part of the workload. You can usually find outsourcing on scenes or episodes where much animation isn't needed, while the main studio works on more important parts. It isn't always a cause for concern, but there are plenty of instances where outsourcing has completely screwed a show over, like in So I'm a Spider. Studio Milipensi had to redo episodes from scratch due to their outsourcers completely laying an egg. It had caused a time crunch that degraded the animation quality. Milipensi then had to beg fans on social media not to send them insensitive messages.
Yo, the monsters y'all be making look like they're straight out of Pokemon Scarlet Violet.
On some occasions, an anime may have a whole 10 or more studios working on it, even by multiple big names that are contributing small bits of animation. For instance, I'm sure plenty of people are unaware that Studio Madhouse was involved in the production of Spirited Away. It wasn't just Ghibli.
This box is like my watch, this shit flooded. What's the price these bitches want it? Tell them up it. Without the money, I don't budge. What's the budget? What's the price? Up it.
Oh, they must have had a small budget.
Is what many fans commonly assume is the reason a studio released a hot pile of garbage. It's something that's been repeatedly overstated. This also applies to the opposite end of the spectrum with stuff like UFO tax evasions, unlimited budget works, or Studio Mappa's Rent-a-Slave. Now let's look at this interview at Anime Fest with Takashi Kubota, the character designer for One Punch Man, where he said this. A lot of people have this common misconception that the quality of the actual animation is based on the production's budget. There are really rare situations where some have a little less and some tend to have a little bit more, but nothing that is very drastic. So in reality, it is based on the staff. While Kubota's claim about anime having roughly the same budgets isn't entirely true, he's correct that anime can shine visually with a low budget, and that the staff is on a higher plane of importance, as are other factors. Like if I go to the most well-respected restaurant in America, McDonald's, I can still have a bad experience if the underpaid 16-year-old in the back sets me up with a bag of oversalted CGI fries. Regarding the staff behind an anime, the overall talent level largely depends on the connections the directors and studios have within the industry. Yes, having connections will get a studio much further than a high budget. Take a look at this anime industry flowchart that showcases the origins of many anime studios. You start to go through and you see things like how Studio Gokumi spawned from Gonzo, which was spawned from some people in Gainax, which was spawned from some of Daikon, and then you go, wow, no wonder anime has so many incestual themes. You can really just see how interconnected everything is, so it makes sense that having relationships with other talent is so prominent within the industry. Next is what many fans refer to as a budget episode. Noticeable drops in animation quality are met with assumptions that sound like, man, Tom's character model sure looked off a lot this ep. Angry Lion Studio must be saving budget for the climax of this Spike arc. This is mostly a fallacy considering that A, most episodes of a series are going to roughly cost the same, and B, whichever episodes the director places the more talented staff on is obviously more important. If Hinata and the boys have a big important game coming up, then the best animators are probably going to be concentrated on that episode, while the episode full of verbal diarrhea likely gets left to some newbies getting paid in expired Club Penguin currency.
Don't give me excuses, give me results!
So sure, if a studio with known quality connections acquires an adaptation, you could argue the chances of it being done well are decent, as opposed to someone like Dean. But once again, there are more factors that we need to consider, like say, scheduling. With the anime industry pumping out more shows than the amount of jizz in a hentai series, it's not uncommon for a studio to be struggling over working on too many anime, or from the production company's pressure to release something quickly. Who remembers the infamous episode 5 of Dragon Ball Super? Well, here in this video, YouTuber AnimeAsia does a detailed animation breakdown of how things started off well but ended up disastrous. Basically, the pre-production of Super only started 2 months before it was set to premiere. Having that type of schedule is asking to get caught with your pants down. Thus, once Toei Animation caught up with the TV broadcast, they had to cut a lot of corners. Well, boss, how does it look? Additionally, scheduling can be dictative of which studios adapt an anime or why an anime studio changes mid-season, contradictory to the fans who are begging them to adapt more of the source material, as if they are solemnly responsible. Studios rarely have control over this, as it's typically the production committee with the final say. In this video of the Anatuber Gigguk touring JC staff, a member reveals that it's the production company Kadokawa who is always approaching them for new adaptations. If issues arise such as the original studio being booked with too many shows, the producer might not want to wait, so they go elsewhere.
I don't know, SpongeBob. He might cramp our style.
The supposed style of an anime studio. It's a large part of how they stand out in the world of otaku, and can sometimes be a dead giveaway as to which of them made an anime. This can include how they use colors, portray emotions, construct a fight scene, or take you from one scene to the next. When Ufotable creates an anime, you can expect to see some eye-catching digital effects. When an anime is made by PA Works, you can expect to see a lot of lighting. When Studio Pierrot adapts a series, you can What the? They literally filled this episode with some goddamn baloney. Outrageous. Consistencies like those have led to many anime fans believing that studios are the major contributor behind an anime's style. But just like with the show's overall quality, studios typically play a smaller part than perceived. For example, let's flash back to Call of the Night in 2022. I remember people saying it looked like or was an anime by Studio Shaft. While it wasn't, this likely happened because it was directed by Tomoyuki Itamaru. He has worked on various Studio Shaft series, which probably led to him being influenced by the animator and director Akayuki Shinbo, who is the driving force behind what is seen as that studio's signature style. You can also see that Shaft doesn't always follow that formula by looking at their anime Luminous Witches, a series where most of Shinbo's trademarks are absent as he did not partake in it. Trademarks like Shinbo's and the aforementioned styles play a big part in how the anime community views, talks, or memes about the various studios.
Watch this, Rolf! Huh?
So rather than the studios themselves, styles are more commonly associated with positions such as the art director, the character designer, or key animators that were brought on. Does anyone remember in Attack on Titan when these scenes of Grisha felt stylistically familiar, but different to how the rest of Studio Mappa's work on the show looked? Well, it's because Masaru Katayo, the chief animation director and character designer of Death Note, was brought on to replicate the dramatic insanity seen in Death Note to showcase Grisha losing his mind. Back to Akiyuki Shinbo, yeah, many of the trends you can find in Shaft's anime, like the anatomy-defying head tilts, are due to his direction. This all isn't to say that studios with their own true styles don't exist. There is what is referred to as a house style. Studios such as Trigger and Kyoto Animation have this, which is why they're two of the most stylistically consistent ones out there.
The American people are tired of women.
The same talent tends to recur at these studios each project, and or they may be founded by a credible animator whose style leaks into those below. More specifically with Kyoto Animation, they are a rare instance of a studio training their animators in-house. And no, I don't mean like the waffle kind. Despite studios not usually being the main responsibility behind their perceived styles, I want to clarify that because they may hire the same talent so oftenly, it's not unfair to say that certain elements are part of their identity in a sense. Like Studio Gohan's, most of the time they be looking like Studio No-Hands. In the case of Ufotable's glamorous effects, their visual identity has been partially achieved due to them having their own digital team equipped with special software. Beyond visuals, there are also other attributes that can make up a studio's style or identity. They may work more frequently on a specific genre like Sunrise with mecha, Pierrot for shonen, and many hentai being made by Studio Edge. Shocker! Storytelling tactics are also something a studio can be known for. Say Studio Ghibli's coming-of-age movies or Studio
Space. Gotta go to space, lady. Space.
So, considering everything I've said, I think it's safe to conclude these two things on whether studios matter or not. 1, it's complicated, and 2, sometimes, but much less than what some fans make them out to be. Thus, I hope at least a few people have learned that there can be many more elements at play regarding an anime's quality. Through some basic research, one can potentially find out why an anime looked or felt the way it did. It's possible they'll discover that they've had a favorite art director, character designer, or Studio Mappa slave all along. There's plenty of people in those positions that deserve more recognition, especially directors. Unfortunately, I don't see the mainstream view of anime studios changing relatively soon, so I guess we'll have to look at the plus sides of how it is currently. It's something that I would argue brings us together as a community through discussions, and it gives anime more of an overall identity in a sense. And plus, it can be fun to joke about. This is Toei's fault.
Hey, what is crackin' Booty Brigade? I know it's been a while since I uploaded, well, much of anything. I guess my brain had production issues. But, you know, as the good old days, Patreon shout out to ShinAMV, Zophalaris, and Snap Zenith, as well as I'd also like to give a special thanks to Seth, Forma, and Galestrom for assistance with the video. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon as well, links to that are in the description below, as well as the credits and references for this video and all that other chicken shit banana shit. That's it for this time. Be sure to smash all the buttons. Peace out, Booty Brigade.